Okay. Again, I want to welcome everybody here to the Pure Land, and I especially want to thank the people that have who are running this Pure Land Buddhist temple, uh, especially Evelina and Helen and Jay, and there's a group of people here that have made this possible and have invited me and by extension all of you to be here today. So generally, I teach here one Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, at least for this year. We're trying this out. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about our how we think about time, and I just put this question out to you: what is time? If you had to think about how your understanding of time came to be. What can you think back and remember? When did you first start understanding the idea of time? You personally. And if you had to write a definition of what time is, what would that definition be? What would your definition of time be? So take a few moments, maybe a minute or so, to just think about this concept of time. When you first encountered it, and if you had to come up with a definition for what time is, what would you say? Okay, so I'd like to open this up just for a few moments to see if anybody would like to share any of their thoughts about this question of time. You know, how would you define it, and how have you come to understand it? Yeah, please.
So for me, time is a social construction that we use to organize our lives.
Okay, a social construction that we use to organize our life. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yes, Jean.
Say it's the basis of the rhythm of life.
The basis of the rhythm of life. Time itself is the basis of the rhythm of life. Okay? Yeah.
To me, it's like a measure of in segments of now, like this now versus that now. And
Hmm.
I feel like its purpose is so that we can all kind of agree or come together or resonate with something
Uh-huh.
for the sake of, I don't know, unifying
Okay,
around
so,
something.
so what I hear you saying is that time is a kind of a measurement to compare this now with a different now, say in the past or in the future, and its purpose is to unify us in some way. We have schedules, for example. We decided to meet here at 1:30, right? And we go till 4:30. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When you asked when I first became aware of time, I thought it's an awareness of happenings, really, in my mind. Time is awareness of events or awareness of happening. That's when it's like I try to think back. Somebody said it's time to eat.
Uh-huh.
That's how you recognize time by change.
Uh-huh. Okay, so recognition of something happening, like it's time to eat, and a recognition of a change. So there's going to be shift. Now it's time to eat. So people shift what they were doing and moving into something different. Would that kind of?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's an awareness. I mean, it is a social construct, the word time. But for me, it's just an awareness.
Okay.
That nothing is staying the same.
Oh, an awareness that nothing is staying the same. Okay. Well, this is a good way to begin. So just a couple of things that I wanted to say about it is, and this is just my own personal reflection, and you can add to this if you like. But one thing is that time serves to orient us, so it tells us where we are. Right now it is 2:15, so we know about where we are. It also tells us where we should be. It gives us it orients us. If I know that if it's 2:15 and I'm here and I'm supposed to be here, then I know I'm in the right place. But if it's 2:15 and I'm in Ames, then I know that I'm not in the right place if I had scheduled to be here. So it also tells us where we were. So this is a sense of time as linear, past, present, and future. Also, another idea is that how we feel depends on our perception of time. So, for example, if we feel that we have a lot of time on our hands and not much to do, what feeling would arise? Boredom, yes, boredom. On the other hand, if we feel we don't have enough time and way too many things to do, what feeling would arise? Anxiety, exactly, yeah. So time also orients us to how we may feel. If we're, say, in the zone, if you heard about that concept of being in the zone, doing you may not be aware of time at all, but you're just into what you're doing. And that view of time, that sense of being in the zone, can actually aid us greatly in our meditation practice. So you may want to reflect as we meditate this afternoon, how are you perceiving time in this moment? Are you perceiving in terms of a linear sense of, I have this much time to be here, and then at the end of it we go? Or do you feel like it's just too short and I can't do enough, I can't settle enough? Those are two views of time. And then there's this third view of just simply entering into what you're doing fully. And maybe completely unaware of the time. You don't actually, I give you the invitation today, right now, that you don't have to be aware of time at all, because I'm the timekeeper. I'll keep time. So you don't have to, I see that clock there. Try not to look at the clock. That's one of the things one of my teachers said to me is when you're, this was in college, he said, when you're writing your paper, try not to look at the clock. And I found that really helpful. I never considered that, I don't have to look at the clock all of the time. You don't have to look at the clock today. Because our view of time really does affect how we meditate. The more aware we are of clock time, for example, the less aware we may be of our actual experience, what we're actually experiencing right now. So the more aware we are of clock time, the less aware we may be of our actual experience, what we're actually experiencing in our body, in our mind, in the environment that's surrounding us. So other ways of viewing time, this idea of clock time is fairly recent, considering the long amount of time that humans have been around on the planet. Clock time has really come about maybe within the last 700 or 800 years. And there's many ways of measuring time besides just the clock. For example, sunlight. The sun gives us a sense of time. If you are on a rhythm of waking up in the morning and going to sleep at night when it gets dark, light gives us a clue as to what time it is, how dark it is outside, how light it is. I mean, we can see the light coming in through the doors here, and that gives us a sense, okay. The moon, also, the phases of the moon gives us a sense of time as well. Is the moon full? Is it absent? Traditionally, in Dogen's time, I heard, anyways, that Dogen did his meditation retreats when the moon was full. So there'd be, about a 4-day period when the moon is full. And you might think about when you're meditating what phase the moon is in, because that can also affect how deeply concentrated we are in our practice. The phase, it may not be something that occurs to you, but our minds are, and just as the tide is affected by the moon, so is our mind and body. And if we're really kind of clued into what we're sensing in our body and the wider thing, the phases of the moon, we may feel that. I used to work at a nursing home as a nurse's aide, and the nurse's aides would often comment that things were always a lot stranger when there was a full moon. And we have in our culture this idea of werewolves coming out. Just we become a little bit crazier at the time of the full moon. But I'll tell you, just my own experience, I've noticed that my meditation practice tends to deepen at the time of a full moon. I'm just able to clear away clutter much easily, less distracted at those times. So just a way of thinking about our practice. The ebb and flow of the tides also give us a sense of time. Where if you've ever been to the beach, you know that the tide rolls in at certain hours and it rolls out at certain hours. The season that we're in gives us a sense of time. And we even feel that, if you've been around for a while, if you've been in this particular body for a while, you know that the seasons, you may be able to actually be experiencing a change in the way the seasons are going. I'm 44, and I know that as a child, the seasons were pretty regular. You could get a sense that winter was winter, and spring is spring, summer is summer, and fall is fall. Maybe there's a little bit of fluctuation in there, especially when the seasons begin to change. But I notice now, as our climate is changing, there's much more fluctuation in the seasons. And so our sense of time is getting altered there. A sense of what time it is in terms of the season that we're in may be shifting a little bit. The stars, where they appear at night. I'm not really good at astronomy or noticing. I notice some of the bigger constellations at times, but there's a side of me that wishes I could go out and gaze at the stars more often, because it just gives a sense of deep time, of being in a very vast space. And you can see that the stars do shift in the sky as well. around the time of Zen Master Dogen. This is Zen Master Dogen lived from 1200 to 1254. In England, there is another monk, a Christian monk, named Richard of Wallingford. He's English, and he was the abbot of St. Albans. He was an astronomer, a mathematician, and an astrologer. He lived from 1292 to 1336. And one of the things that he invented was the clock, kind of the closest version of the modern day clock that we have today. And so he's credited with that. And around this time, on another side of the planet, Zen Master Dogen in Japan, he gives us another way of viewing time that you may not be aware of. So some of you may be aware of this book by Shohaku Okumura. It's called Realizing Genjo Koan. And in this, Dogen talks a bit about time. And Shohaku Okumura, who teaches out in Bloomington, Indiana, also he gives really clear commentary of Dogen's understanding of time. So for Dogen, so we can just erase all of our understanding of time. Everything you've said so far is a particular perception of time. Dogen has another view of time. He says time is the same as being. So try to get your mind wrapped around that. Time equals being. Our usual way of understanding time is that it runs on a continuum. It goes from past to the present and into the future. But Dogen, and that's a conventional use of time. I'm not suggesting we should get rid of it, but Dogen says that this is a kind of misconception or a misperception of time. Of course, it's a human fabrication, first of all, but it's also a misconception of time. So we're going to look at that a little bit deeper here. Dogen says that each moment is absolute and complete. Each moment is complete and whole in and of itself, with no past and no future. Now, this is a really hard thing to kind of try to understand, that because it seems like, from our ordinary point of view, that we came from someplace, we got here now, and we're going to some other place after this moment, after we leave here. And that may be true, but it doesn't help us to really get into the present moment, especially if we're trying to get our minds wrapped around this idea that the present moment has no future and no past. There's no future or past in relation to the present moment. A really great modern calligrapher named Kaz Tanahashi, I got a chance to study with him a little bit, just a few days, and he asked us, where is the place that you can find, where is the biggest place that you can conceive of? If you were asked that, what would you say? What's the biggest place that you can conceive of? Your mind? You think that's the biggest? Okay. Anybody else? Space, okay, space.
I could say the universe, but I can't conceive of a universe that has no end.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yes, okay, so the universe, but maybe how can we conceive of a universe that has no end? Kaz's answer to that question was the present moment. The present moment is the largest space that can be conceived of. And let's look at why that would be the case. And it may seem, here's a thing. We may think that we're in the present moment when we're actually not. We're oftentimes, and when we're sitting in meditation, we may think that we're in the present moment when in reality we're not. We're in our heads, or we're already conceptualizing our experience rather than experiencing our experience. So, for example, if you think that the present moment is something to be gotten out of, something that is depressing, I would say that you're not in the present moment, because depressing is already a label we've placed on an experience. So, in other words, we have this feeling in our body, and our mind very quickly, without much thought, will label that feeling as either good or bad, anxious, depressed, whatever it is that we label it. And those labels may be helpful for certain times and places. But as far as meditation goes, they actually pull us out of the present moment. We're not actually experiencing what's going on in our body. And this is what when Dogen says time equals being, time itself is being, are we actually aware of being, or are we thinking about being? Are we thinking about what we're feeling, or are we actually feeling it? Here's the way that Dogen talks about time as not having a past or present moment as not having a past or future. Here's Dogen. Again, this is the 13th century. He says, firewood becomes ash. Right? Firewood, when you burn it, it becomes ash. Ash cannot become firewood again. So you can't go backwards. However, we should not view ash as after and firewood as before. And yet that's what we do with our minds. We say, okay, before it was ash, it was firewood. After it was firewood, it was ash. And we're placing this on a continuum. He says, we should know that firewood dwells in the Dharma position of firewood and has its own before and after. Although before and after exist, past and future are cut off. Ash stays in the position of ash with its own before and after. This is another way of saying that each moment is whole and complete in and of itself, with no future and no past. This is another way of helping us to enter more deeply into the present moment, a moment that may be very difficult for us to enter into. Another way, yeah.
What is the difference between before and past?
Okay, what is the difference between before and past? So in this,
It doesn't have a future, doesn't have a past, but there's a before and an after.
okay, yeah. So, good question. So the past is something that. So in the context of firewood, ash, in the context of ash, we say that that before it was ash, it was firewood. Or we could replace that before with the past form of ash was firewood. Either way, you can use either one. Then Dogen says ash has its own before and after. So what does that mean? How do we get our minds wrapped around that? One way I think is to consider that the present moment cannot be measured. It's another way of saying this is that the present moment has no measurement. The measurement we could place on it is a zero. Or the flip of that is infinity. And often we're not aware of that zero or infinity aspect that we can touch when we're sitting. So we can enter into that space of infinity right now. But our idea of past and future or before and after mess us up often in really doing that. Shohaku says this, he says, the present moment is the only reality we experience because the past is already gone and the future has not yet come. Yet, there is nothing, no actual unit of time we can say constitutes the present moment. If we're really in the present, we can't say there's a particular unit of time that constitutes that. The present moment, he says, does not exist. The present moment does not exist, and therefore time itself does not really exist. This is really hard to get our minds conceptually wrapped around, but here, these are just some tips I want to offer for meditation, which we're just about to start here. So one thing is to consider concentrating a little bit more on the present moment. Increase your sense of focus. This is one suggestion. Increase your sense of focus on the present moment. What are you actually experiencing right now? How open are your senses? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, heart, mind. How open are you? Another thing, number 2. As you notice your thoughts, as you begin to notice your thoughts wandering out of the present moment, which is totally normal and is a part of practice, so we don't have to be worried if that happens. It's going to happen. It happens to me. See if you can analyze the content of your thought just to the degree that you can be aware as if that thought is about the future or if it's about the past. And if your thought are about the future, label it future. If it's about the past, label it past. That can help you to enter into the present. Or, sometimes when we label what our mental experience is, what we're thinking about in a very general sense, putting a label on. These are future thoughts. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do, or I'm thinking about what has happened. You can label it past or future. Just do that. See if that helps you to enter more deeply into the present moment. This is one way. This is one thing I've found helpful. A third thing, focus on the sensations in your body. What are you actually sensing? What are you actually sensing in your body? It could be, the contact your body is making with the ground or your chair. Fourth is to focus on sound. Focus on what you can hear. That can also help us to enter into the present moment. Smell. Focus on smell. And the last thing is, don't look at the clock. Don't look at the clock. In Zen temples, in Japan anyways, and in training temples here in the United States, we're asked not to wear a watch in the zendo, in the meditation hall. because for this reason, because we want to do this. You know, what time is it? There's other ways of telling time, and we've just gone through some of them. There's other ways of recognizing time. And again, Dogen says here, time itself is being. So this is an exploration. I invite you to check this out as we begin our meditation for this afternoon. Okay, so I want to thank you. Thank you for your ears.